Zariah Caldwell stood at the head of her penthouse conference room, the skyline of Manhattan glowing behind her, quiet, distant, steady. Her posture was calm, her expression unreadable, her presence commanding. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't shift her weight. She simply watched as the glass doors opened, and the two people she least expected, Tobias and Saren, were escorted inside. Tobias froze the moment he saw the child in the stroller beside her. His knees weakened, his breath caught in his throat. The same child he rejected before she even arrived was now staring back at him with bright, curious eyes. Saren's face tightened, drawn with panic and regret she could no longer disguise. "Zariah," Tobias whispered, his voice trembling as if the words hurt to push out. "We didn't know. Please, please hear us out." Zariah didn't blink. She didn't flinch. Her silence carried a strength that made Tobias's shoulders sink even lower. The calmness she displayed, steady, effortless, did more damage than any raised voice ever could. Security guided them farther into the room, while reporters gathered in the lobby below, waiting to see how the heiress of a trillion-dollar empire would address the couple who abandoned her during the darkest moment of her life. As Tobias walked, he leaned closer, desperation leaking through every word. "Zariah, don't ruin us. We were wrong, but we can fix this." She lifted her head slowly, her tone level and deliberate. "The day you left me pregnant and grieving was the day you fixed your fate. Have you ever been abandoned during your weakest moment? Have you ever watched the very people who hurt you return only when your life finally began to rise? This is the story of a woman who lost everything in 1 month, her mother, her marriage, her best friend, only to climb higher than anyone imagined. A story of heartbreak, betrayal, purpose, and unexpected love. A story that reminds us that sometimes the people who walk away are part of the path that prepares us for something greater. Before we begin, please like this video and comment "I'm watching." It helps YouTube share this story with others who love powerful life lessons. Welcome back to Mr. Michael's Stories, where life's most powerful lessons come wrapped in unforgettable tales, where yesterday's quiet sacrifices echo into today's hardest choices. Here, we unwrap the hidden truths of everyday lives, where family ties are tested, broken, and sometimes, miraculously, restored. If you're new to this family, thank you for joining us. Please hit the subscribe button because it helps us share stories like this on YouTube. Charlotte had a rhythm that felt like home pulsing through every block. A rhythm that raised Zariah Caldwell long before she understood what it meant to be loved, protected, and shaped by a community. Her childhood sat on the sturdy foundation of front porch stories, gospel music carried through open windows on Sunday mornings, and neighbors who acted less like acquaintances and more like extended family members assigned by God Himself. Their street wasn't quiet. It wasn't polished. It wasn't filled with expensive cars or gated lawns. Instead, it was a place where children ran free until streetlights came on, where grill smoke drifted from yard to yard during summer cookouts, and where everyone knew everyone else's business, not out of malice, but out of a shared sense of responsibility. Zariah grew up as the girl who always smiled, even when life pressed her. A girl quick to help carry groceries for the older folks, to assist her cousins in braiding each other's hair, or run errands for her mother without complaint. She belonged to a community that believed in speaking blessings over children before their first day of school, in greeting each other even when passing quickly, in giving advice even when no one asked for it. Church aunties were known to stop Zariah mid-step just to fix her collar, or hand her a tissue for the shine on her face, even if nothing was wrong. Her mother, Marvell Caldwell, stood tall in the center of that world like a quiet, comforting pillar. A single mother who never raised her voice, never discussed her finances, and never drew attention to herself despite having a wardrobe that could have easily turned heads. She always chose muted dresses, practical shoes, and hairstyles she could maintain at home. People often wondered how she afforded private school for Zariah, how their house always stayed updated, how she managed to travel without ever struggling, but no one pushed too far. In their community, people respected boundaries even while being involved. Marvell kept a discipline about her routine that both fascinated and confused her daughter. She woke early, prayed on her knees by the window, cooked breakfast from scratch, and left for her office job that seemed far too simple for a woman with her confidence. Zariah remembered many moments of watching her mother count a stack of bills with no visible stress, or speak in hushed yet decisive tones on the phone before catching herself and stepping outside to finish the call. Whenever Zariah asked about it, Marvell smiled with warmth and said, "Everything in life doesn't need an audience." Learned that early. Zariah didn't fully understand then. She only understood that her mother didn't flaunt anything. Not money, not achievements, not sadness, not fear. She moved through life with modesty and gentleness, but an unmistakable stability that always made people straighten their posture when she entered a room. She taught Zariah the importance of keeping her heart open but her private life secure, a lesson that would later become the only thing keeping her sane. The richness of black culture shaped every season of Zariah's youth. Summer block parties where old-school R&B played loud enough to shake the street. Fall festivals in the church. Parking lot where children bobbed for apples and adults debated over who made the best macaroni. Holiday dinners that required 3 tables and an overflow section in the living room. There was love in everything. In the way people argued, in how they corrected, in how they guided, and in how they laughed loudly without apology. It was during her teenage years, somewhere between learning to drive and trying to survive pre-college anxiety, that 2 people became permanent fixtures in her life, Saren Wade and Tobias Granger. Saren came first, a neighborhood girl who lived 3 blocks away, outgoing with a sharp sense of humor and a personality that demanded attention. Saren wasn't malicious by nature, but she carried a restlessness that made her compare herself to others more than she admitted. Zariah never saw it clearly, because she loved Saren with a loyalty that made her blind to small cracks. Saren envied how easily people trusted Zariah, how adults praised her, how Marvell seemed to have everything under control. Saren admired it, yet it stirred something uncomfortable in her, a feeling she buried behind laughter and exaggerated compliments. Then came Tobias. He entered Zariah's life during senior year of high school, the year she finally started thinking about what adulthood could offer. Tobias didn't grow up in her neighborhood. His family lived across town in a quieter, more manicured area, a place where neighbors rarely spoke unless at HOA meetings, and where silence at dinner was normal. Their worlds were different socially, culturally, even spiritually. Still, Tobias gravitated toward Zariah in a way that surprised everyone. He liked her warmth. He liked how she smiled when she talked. He liked how she listened as though every word mattered. But beneath that attraction was a discomfort he thought he hid well. Tobias was raised in a home obsessed with appearances, with looking refined even when finances were strained, with presenting themselves as above the families who lived on the other side of the city. When Tobias first visited Zariah's home, he felt overwhelmed by how loud her aunties were, how freely her uncles teased him, how children ran in and out as if the house were a community center. He tried to laugh along, but the discomfort never left his shoulders. What Zariah viewed as warmth, Tobias viewed as chaotic. What she saw as culture, he saw as disorder. And though he never said these things out loud, the judgment simmered quietly. Marvell noticed. She always noticed. She welcomed Tobias with kindness, but kept a watchful eye on how he responded to her community. When he looked uneasy during a cookout, she caught it. When he failed to greet elders properly, she filed it away silently. She didn't criticize him. She simply paid attention. Saren, on the other hand, noticed Tobias for a different reason. She saw someone who came from a background she admired, reserved, polished, financially comfortable, even if not wealthy. Saren saw Tobias as someone who would climb higher in life. She didn't yet know that her own desire for status would eventually lead her down a darker path, but the seeds were planted during those early years. Through college and early adulthood, the 3 of them remained close. Saren and Zariah spent nights studying together, sharing dreams about their futures. Tobias and Zariah dated on and off, trying to balance their different worlds. Marvell encouraged Zariah to pursue her education, to stay focused, and to not let any relationship derail her plans. What no one knew, not Saren, not Tobias, not her neighbors, was that Marvell had been slowly preparing Zariah for something far beyond anything they imagined. Quiet business trips, private meetings, sealed envelopes that she locked away every night. The hints were there. Zariah simply didn't understand their meaning yet. Her mother's mysterious modesty wasn't shyness. It was protection. It was strategy. It was legacy. Zariah thought she was being raised by a humble office worker. but she was being shaped by a woman running one of the world's most powerful financial networks under a veil of intentional simplicity. And when the time came, that truth would not only change Zariah's life, it would expose the cracks in Tobias and Saren long before she ever suspected betrayal. The morning Marvell Caldwell died began like any other day, quiet, steady, peaceful in the way the world feels before something irreversible happens. The sun had barely risen when Zariah woke to the smell of oatmeal warming in the kitchen. Her mother followed the same routine every weekday: prayer, breakfast, and a hum under her breath as she prepared for work. It was the kind of ordinary pattern that feels eternal, until the one day it stops. Zariah walked into the kitchen, still half asleep, rubbing her eyes as she smiled at her mother. "Morning, Ma." Marvell smiled back, though it didn't reach her eyes as fully as usual. There was a faint dullness in her expression, a hint of tiredness Zariah dismissed as normal exhaustion. If she had looked closer, she might have seen the tightness in her mother's fingers or the way she paused between breaths. But nothing prepares you for losing someone who has always been your anchor. "Morning, baby," Marvell replied softly. "Sit down. Breakfast is almost done." Zariah sat, scrolling through her phone. She had just learned she was pregnant days earlier, and she had rehearsed a dozen times how she would tell her mother. She pictured the tears, the laughter, the way Marvell would press a hand to her chest before pulling her into a hug. She imagined them shopping for baby clothes together, praying together, choosing names together. It was supposed to be a joyful moment. That moment never came. Marvell's hand slipped from the counter. The spoon she was holding clattered to the floor. "Ma?" Zariah stood quickly. Before she reached her, Marvell collapsed, her body hitting the ground with a sound that split Zariah's heart open. Zariah screamed for help, her voice cracking as she knelt beside her mother. Her hands trembled as she pressed her fingers against Marvell's neck, searching for a pulse. It was faint, weak, unsteady. "Ma, stay with me. Please, stay with me," Zariah cried, her voice shaking with fear. She dialed 911 with trembling hands, tears already blurring her vision. Every second felt like an hour. By the time paramedics arrived, Zariah was pacing back and forth in the living room, praying under her breath, her fingers interlocked so tightly they were turning pale. The paramedics worked quickly, but their expressions told a story she didn't want to accept. "Ma'am, we're taking her to the hospital. Follow us." Zariah rode behind the ambulance, gripping her phone, her heart beating wildly. She called Tobias 3 times. No answer. She texted Saren, hoping someone would meet her at the hospital. When she arrived, they rushed Marvell into a room. Zariah stood helpless in the hallway, her chest aching, her stomach tightening with pregnancy cramps brought on by stress. She whispered every prayer she had ever been taught. "God, don't take her. Please don't take her. I'm not ready." 20 minutes later, a doctor walked out with an expression that made her knees weaken. "Miss Caldwell, I'm sorry, we did everything we could." The hallway tilted, sound muffled. Her heartbeat crashed in her ears. She collapsed into a chair, trying to breathe, trying to understand how a routine morning turned into a nightmare. Only hours earlier, her mother had been humming in the kitchen. Now she was gone. News spread through the neighborhood quickly. Church aunties arrived within hours with soup and blankets. Her uncles sat on the porch shaking their heads, processing the shock. Cousins offered to stay the night, but Zariah insisted she needed time alone, though deep down she felt more alone than she ever had in her entire life. She cried until her voice gave out. She curled up in her mother's bed, inhaling the scent of her pillow. She walked through rooms touching lamps, folded clothes, old photographs, anything that still held warmth. That night, she called Tobias again. This time he answered. "Zariah, what's wrong? You've called me like 8 times. I'm in the middle of something. My mom." "She's gone," she whispered. A pause, then a low, almost detached, "What? When?" "Today. Please, come. I need you." Another pause. "I'll try. I have work in the morning." Work was the reason he couldn't rush to her in the worst moment of her life. It was the first time she felt truly abandoned by him, but not the last. She texted Saren after, praying for some comfort. Saren replied quickly, "I'm coming." But even in her comfort, Saren's presence felt slightly off, as if she were juggling sympathy with something else lingering behind her eyes. She hugged Zariah tightly, yet her gaze drifted around the house, as though she were studying the space instead of focusing fully on her grieving friend. Zariah barely slept. Her appetite vanished. Her pregnancy symptoms grew worse: nausea, dizziness, waves of emotional exhaustion. She expected Tobias to step in, to hold her, to talk her through the pain. Instead, he kept his distance, showing up sporadically with shallow excuses. "I'm tired. Work has been crazy. I don't know how to help you." Each excuse cut her deeper. Saren, on the other hand, showed up daily, too attentive, too eager, too willing to fill a role Tobias should have been fulfilling. She sat close, touched Zariah's arm often, offered to run errands. On the surface, it looked like support. Beneath the surface, there was a comfort she seemed to draw from Tobias's absence. People in the neighborhood noticed. A few aunties exchanged glances. An uncle muttered, "Something ain't right with that girl." But Zariah was too heartbroken to see clearly. The funeral took place on a warm Saturday morning at a church Zariah had attended since childhood. The building overflowed with people: neighbors, co-workers, former classmates, extended family, pastors from nearby churches, even people Zariah barely recognized who had been quietly touched by Marvell's kindness. The sanctuary felt heavy, not with gloom, but with love. People cried openly, sharing stories of how Marvell paid someone's light bill one winter, helped another get a job, or offered counsel during a difficult time. She had been a pillar, even silently, even secretly. What Zariah didn't know was that her mother had helped many people financially, but always anonymously. She never wanted praise. As the choir sang, Zariah felt her chest tighten. She could barely stand, so an aunt held her upright while she sobbed. The pregnancy made every emotion sharper, every breath harder. Tobias finally arrived, late. He walked in wearing a suit wrinkled at the sleeves, looking more uncomfortable than sorrowful. He approached Zariah, placed a light hand on her back and whispered, "I'm here," though he didn't act like he fully understood what here meant. Saren, seated beside him, reached out to touch Zariah's arm as well. But the moment felt strange, as if Saren and Tobias were connected in some quiet, unspoken way that made Zariah's grief feel even heavier. During the service, Tobias and Saren sat together, whispering occasionally. Their heads leaned close, their shoulders brushing. People noticed. People whispered. Zariah didn't. Her eyes stayed forward, fixed on the casket that carried the only person who had loved her without condition. At the burial site, as flowers were lowered onto the casket, Zariah's knees buckled. She let out a cry so raw it shook the air. Family members rushed to catch her. Tobias stood nearby but hesitated as if unsure whether to help. Saren stepped forward instead, pulling Zariah close, too familiar, while Tobias watched with an expression that could not be easily interpreted. Some family members exchanged looks. The uneasiness between Tobias and Saren was no longer subtle. It was visible. That night, when Zariah returned home, her grief surged into a wave she couldn't control. She curled into her mother's favorite chair, hugged a blanket to her chest and cried until exhaustion finally dragged her into a restless sleep. She didn't know it yet, but this was the beginning of the unraveling of her marriage. This was the moment her spirit shattered, the moment she needed her husband the most, yet he stood at a distance, already drifting away. And unknown to her, Saren had already stepped into a space she never should have crossed. The week after Marvell's funeral felt like a month trapped inside a single long, suffocating breath. The house was too quiet, the air too heavy, the memories too loud. Every room in that home reminded Zariah of something she could no longer reach: her mother humming, cooking, praying, folding laundry while offering gentle life advice. Loss had its own way of lingering, turning familiar spaces into reminders that scraped at her heart. Pregnancy hormones made the grief sharper, making her burst into tears without warning. Some nights she couldn't sleep at all, pacing the hallway for hours. Other nights, she cried into her mother's blanket until exhaustion forced her eyes shut. Tobias didn't stay with her through any of it. He came by twice that week, both visits lasting less than an hour. Each time, he sat in the living room with a stiffness that made Zariah feel as though she were burdening him simply by existing. He avoided her gaze, avoided touching her, avoided the conversations she desperately needed. On Thursday afternoon she asked quietly, "Tobias, do you think you can stay the night? I barely slept last night. I feel like everything is falling apart." Tobias hesitated. I've got a meeting early tomorrow. I need rest. Rest. The one thing she hadn't had since the morning her mother collapsed. He left soon after, leaving her standing in the doorway with her hand resting protectively on her stomach. On Saturday morning, 1 week after the funeral, a knock came at the door. Zariah wiped her face, expecting maybe a relative or someone from church bringing food. Instead, when she opened the door, a man in a suit stood holding a large envelope. "Are you Zariah Caldwell?" "Yes." He handed her the document. "These are for you." The envelope felt heavy even before she opened it. Her fingers trembled as she slid the papers out and saw the header. Her eyes froze on the page. Her breath collapsed inward. There was Tobias's signature at the bottom, firm, deliberate, unmistakable. Her heart slammed against her ribs as her knees weakened. "No, this has to be a mistake," she whispered to herself. "We're going through a hard time. He wouldn't do this. He wouldn't do this now." She called Tobias. No answer. She called again. Still no answer. On the third attempt, he finally picked up. "Tobias, what is this? Why did someone bring divorce papers to my door?" she asked, her voice shaking with hurt and disbelief. Tobias exhaled, as if he'd been expecting the call. "Zariah, we haven't been working for a long time. You know that." "My mother just died," she cried. "I'm pregnant, and you choose now? Now, Tobias?" Silence. Not a comforting silence. Not a hesitant silence. An empty silence. Then he said, "It's better this way. Neither of us is happy." She felt something inside her tear, not just hurt, but shock so deep it numbed her skin. "You could have talked to me. You could have waited until I was no longer dealing with all of this." "It wouldn't change anything," Tobias replied, his voice flat. "I'm sorry you're hurting, but I need to move on. This is the right decision." He ended the call. Zariah stood still in her living room, holding the phone to her ear, long after the line went silent. Her tears fell one by one, sliding down her chin onto the papers she never imagined would appear in her life. Her marriage wasn't just ending. It had been discarded, abandoned, thrown away without a conversation, without compassion, without care for her grief or her unborn child. And Tobias didn't seem to feel an ounce of remorse. Only days earlier, Saren had been by Zariah's side constantly, offering comfort that felt a little too close, a little too constant. But after the divorce papers arrived, Saren's visits started thinning out. Her responses to texts became shorter. Her tone shifted from warm to shallow, as if she were intentionally stepping back rather than stepping in. Zariah didn't understand why. One evening, Zariah called her. "Saren, can you come over? I can't be alone right now." A pause. Then Saren replied, her voice oddly strained. "I'm with someone right now. I'll check on you later, okay?" Someone. She didn't say who. She didn't offer comfort. She didn't ask how Zariah was holding up. Zariah hung up slowly, swallowing a pain that pushed deeper than she wanted to admit. She chalked it up to the stress of everything going on, but something in her gut whispered that Saren wasn't overwhelmed. She was hiding something. The days that followed were the darkest Zariah had ever lived through. Her pregnancy symptoms intensified: fatigue, nausea, sharp emotional swings. She struggled to eat. She struggled to breathe. She struggled to comprehend how life could strip so much from her so quickly. Some mornings she woke hopeful, only to crumble again when she remembered the silence in the house. Other mornings she stared at her reflection, wondering how she was supposed to raise a child alone when the man who vowed to stand beside her walked away before the baby even arrived. She missed her mother with a depth that felt physical. She missed Tobias, even though he didn't deserve that kind of longing. She missed Saren, not realizing yet that the distance Saren created wasn't about stress. It was about guilt. Zariah attended prenatal appointments alone. She slept alone. She cooked alone. She mourned alone. Her community offered support, but people had their own lives. They couldn't stay 24/7. She would thank them with a weak smile and close the door behind them, only to sink into solitude again. At night, she pressed her hand over her stomach and whispered to her baby, "It's just us now. I'll protect you. I'll give you everything I can." Those whispered promises kept her sane. 2 weeks after the divorce papers arrived, Zariah stood in line at a small grocery store, picking up essentials. her hair bundled under a scarf, her eyes dull with exhaustion. As she placed items on the counter, she overheard two women whispering loudly behind her. "You heard Saren got married?" "Yeah, to that man she was always hanging around." "What was his name again?" "Tobias. Tobias Granger. Chile. Ain't that Zariah's husband?" "Ex-husband now. They got married quick." Zariah froze. Her breath vanished. Her hands trembled so violently, a can nearly rolled off the counter. She turned slowly. The women stared at her wide-eyed, realizing she had heard everything. "Oh, sweetie, we didn't know you were right here," one of them said softly. Zariah couldn't speak. The world around her blurred. It felt like the ground was tilting beneath her feet. She paid for her items, without looking up, and walked straight to her car. When she sat inside, she gripped the steering wheel so tightly her knuckles turned pale. Tobias didn't just divorce her. He married Saren, her best friend, her sister in spirit, the woman she trusted the most, the woman who held her at the funeral. The betrayal was no longer subtle. It was complete. They didn't even wait. They didn't care how it looked. They didn't care about her grief. They didn't care about her pregnancy. They cared only about themselves. Her hands shook as tears spilled down her face. She sat in the car for nearly 20 minutes, unable to move, unable to think, unable to process how deeply her world had broken. That same evening, as she sat on her couch staring blankly at the wall, there was a gentle knock on the door. When she opened it, a woman stood in a navy suit with a leather briefcase. "Miss Caldwell?" "Yes. I represent the estate of your mother, Marvell Caldwell. May I come in?" Zariah stepped aside silently. The woman placed a sealed cream envelope on the table. "Your mother instructed that this letter and the accompanying documents be delivered 2 weeks after her passing." Zariah blinked, confused and drained. "Do you know what's inside?" "I know only that your mother said these words: 'This will guide my daughter when she feels most alone.'" Her voice broke hearing that. The woman continued, "Read this when you feel ready. It may change everything you think you know about your life." After she left, Zariah stared at the envelope for a long time before finally opening it. Inside was a single handwritten line in Marvell's familiar script. "Zariah, you are the heir to everything. Protect your heart. Build your life. Your time is coming." Below the letter were dozens of documents, contracts, financial statements, trust agreements, international holdings, but her mind couldn't process them yet. She pressed the letter to her heart, tears falling silently. Her world had collapsed. Her marriage was gone. Her best friend betrayed her. Her mother had left her too soon. Yet somehow, in the middle of that destruction, a new world was waiting, one she didn't even know she belonged to. That night, for the first time since everything began, Zariah felt something other than pain. She felt the beginning of a shift, the smallest spark of something she hadn't felt in weeks. Strength. If this part of Zariah's journey has touched your heart, please take a moment to like this video and comment to support the story. Your engagement helps more viewers discover these powerful life lessons. Zariah didn't tell anyone she was leaving Charlotte. Not her cousins, not church members, not Saren, and certainly not Tobias. After the betrayal, the stares, the questions, and the weight of her grief pressing down like layers of wet blankets, Charlotte no longer felt like home. Every street reminded her of her mother. Every store reminded her of errands she used to run with Marvell. Every familiar voice stirred up memories that split her heart a little more. She needed air. She needed quiet. She needed distance from every wound that kept reopening. Before dawn one Saturday morning, she packed 2 suitcases, clothes, prenatal vitamins, journals, and her mother's letter, and placed them neatly by the door. She stood in the hallway for several minutes, looking at the house she grew up in. A part of her felt guilty for leaving it behind, but another part of her knew she had no choice. Healing couldn't happen where the pain lived. She walked through each room, one last time. The kitchen where her mother collapsed, the bedroom where she used to curl against Marvell during storms, the living room where her community gathered after the funeral, the front porch where neighbors waved at her daily. Tears filled her eyes, but she swallowed them. If she cried now, she would never leave. She locked the door gently, slid the key underneath the welcome mat for her uncle to retrieve later, and walked away carrying nothing but her bags and the faint hope that somewhere new might help her breathe again. Zariah drove south for hours, letting the hum of the highway drown out her thoughts. She kept the windows cracked just enough to feel fresh air brushing against her cheeks. The movement of the car felt oddly comforting, predictable, steady, something she could control. She had chosen Beaufort, South Carolina, after searching online for quiet coastal towns with prenatal resources and low tourist traffic. She didn't want crowded beaches, nightlife, or noise. She wanted space. She wanted stillness. She wanted to be somewhere no one knew her name, her past, or her heartbreak. When she arrived, Beaufort greeted her with soft morning light reflecting on calm water. Spanish moss hung from old trees like gentle curtains. Streets were lined with small shops, quiet cafes, and pastel houses with rocking chairs on their porches. It wasn't fancy. It wasn't modern. It was peaceful. Exactly what she needed. She rented a small one-bedroom apartment near the marsh. The space wasn't luxurious, but it had wide windows that let sunlight in, and the distant sound of water helped her fall asleep at night. For the first time in weeks, she felt her shoulders lower slightly, as if the weight she carried was beginning to shift. The days that followed were not easy. Healing never is, but they were slow, steady, and necessary. Zariah created a routine to hold on to, even when her emotions were unpredictable. Prenatal classes. She enrolled in a small prenatal support group, led by a retired nurse named Miss Jeanette. The group met twice a week in a room filled with floor mats and calming music. The women talked about their symptoms, fears, and cravings. Most came with partners who rubbed their backs or helped them breathe through exercises. Zariah came alone. The first time she realized she was the only one without a partner, something inside her cracked. But Miss Jeanette sat beside her and said gently, "You're not alone. You're just early in the journey of becoming stronger." The words felt like balm on an open wound. Therapy sessions. Zariah began virtual therapy every Friday afternoon. Her therapist listened without judgment as she talked about her mother, her fear of raising a child alone, Tobias's betrayal, and the ache of losing Saran. Some sessions left her crying. Others left her quiet and reflective, but each one made her feel a little less overwhelmed. Journaling. Every night, she wrote letters to her unborn baby in a spiral notebook. She wrote about her hopes, her fears, her plans. She wrote about her mother's wisdom and how she wanted to pass it on. Some nights, she just scribbled words like, "Why?" or "How do I move forward?" But even those scribbles mattered. They were steps toward healing. Long walks by the water. Beaufort's waterfront became her refuge. She walked slowly, one hand on her belly, watching boats move across the marsh, listening to the distant call of birds. She found a wooden bench overlooking the water where she sat for hours some days, breathing in the salty breeze and allowing her heart to rest. Despite these practices, loneliness still crept in at night. Silence amplified every thought she tried to escape. Sometimes she reached out for her mother's blanket, pressing it against her face to smell the faint scent that remained. Other nights, she placed her hand on her stomach and whispered, "It's just us, but we're going to make it." The first month in Beaufort was emotionally heavy. She cried more than she slept. Memories of Tobias and Saran replayed at the worst moments. She questioned whether she was strong enough to be a mother on her own. But gradually, almost without realizing, something inside her shifted. She began waking up without immediately crying. She started cooking breakfast instead of skipping meals. She laughed once during a prenatal class and surprised herself. She felt her baby kick for the first time, and the sensation filled her with warmth. She walked a little farther each day, breathed a little deeper each morning. Isolation wasn't healing her, but it gave her the space to start healing herself. Every day she reclaimed a small piece of herself, the version she lost when grief and betrayal consumed her. She didn't forgive Tobias. She didn't forgive Saran. But she started forgiving herself for not seeing the signs, for trusting too deeply, for loving people who didn't deserve her. She remembered her mother's words, "Never let people know everything about you, especially your strength." In Beaufort, she wasn't rebuilding by hiding. She was rebuilding by understanding who she was without the weight of her past. She was learning to stand again. Slowly, quietly, but firmly. And though she didn't know it yet, she was drawing closer to someone who would see her pain, not as a weakness but as a doorway to something deeper. Someone who would meet her in the middle of her healing and help her see the beauty in being seen again. Beaufort had become a gentle cocoon for Zariah. Quiet streets, slow mornings, the soft chorus of water brushing against the marsh grass. She spent most days sticking to her routine: prenatal classes, journaling sessions, solitary walks along the waterfront. Healing wasn't a straight path, but Beaufort made the wait feel a little less suffocating. Still, some days, loneliness pressed against her ribs like a dull ache. Not the kind of loneliness cured by company, but the kind that comes from losing pieces of yourself in the storms life throws unexpectedly. She carried that ache with her one breezy afternoon, when she ventured out to grab groceries from a small local market 2 blocks from her apartment. As she stepped outside, balancing her purse, water bottle, and grocery list, her foot caught on a loose brick in the walkway. The world tilted forward, panic shot through her chest as she braced for impact. Her hands flew instinctively to protect her stomach. Before she hit the ground, a pair of steady hands caught her by the arms. "Careful. Got you," a man said, his voice low and calm. Zariah froze for a moment, her breath caught. She lifted her gaze and saw a tall man with sandy blonde hair and soft brown eyes, looking at her with genuine concern. Not pity, not curiosity, just steady, grounded concern. "You okay?" he asked gently. Zariah nodded quickly, embarrassed. "Why, yeah, I just wasn't paying attention." His grip loosened as she regained her balance. "No harm done. That brick has tried to take out half the town. You're not the first." Despite herself, she let out a small laugh. It surprised her. She hadn't laughed at a stranger's comment in months. "I'm Colden Reeves," he said, offering a small, friendly smile. There was something about his demeanor, relaxed but respectful, that made her feel momentarily safe, even though he was a stranger. "I'm Zariah," she replied, nodding politely. "Nice to meet you, Zariah. Be careful around here. These sidewalks aren't as forgiving as the scenery is." She gave a faint smile. "I'll keep that in mind." He stepped aside so she could continue her walk, and she expected the moment to dissolve like any other brief encounter. But as she walked away, she felt something unusual. Not attraction, not interest, just awareness. Like her spirit had briefly bumped into someone else's at the exact time she needed grounding. She shook it off and headed toward the market. A stranger catching her was not the beginning of anything. It was just a moment. She told herself that firmly. But fate, as always, had its own rhythm. Rain arrived unexpectedly 2 days later, pouring down in thick sheets that drummed against rooftops. Zariah hurried down the sidewalk after her prenatal appointment, her jacket doing little to shield her from the downpour. She was halfway to her car when someone jogged up beside her, holding an umbrella. "Zariah?" She turned. It was Colden. He looked just as surprised as she felt. "You're going to get soaked," he said, lifting the umbrella toward her. She shook her head quickly. "I'm fine. I don't want to mess up your clothes." He glanced down at his shirt, already damp from running toward her, and chuckled. "I think the damage is done." She hesitated. She wasn't used to people insisting on helping her anymore. Tobias had barely lifted a hand to comfort her during the hardest moments of her life. Accepting kindness felt strange now, foreign. "I'm okay," she repeated softly. "Humor me," he replied, but his voice wasn't pushy. It was light, almost teasing. "At least let me walk you to your car." She hesitated again, then nodded. They walked together under the umbrella, the silence comfortable instead of awkward. The rain clattered around them like a protective curtain, muting the world. "You're new here, right?" he asked gently. "Yeah. Moved not too long ago. Beaufort is one of those towns that grows on you," he said, slowly. Then suddenly, Zariah smiled at that. "I'm still waiting for the suddenly." "You will," he said confidently. "Give it time." When they reached her car, she thanked him. Before she could get in, he added, "Hey, if you ever need directions or recommendations on places to avoid the crowds, let me know. I'm around." She nodded politely, trying not to think too much of it. He didn't ask for her number. He didn't linger. He didn't scan her belly with judgment or curiosity. He simply wished her a good day and walked away. Zariah watched him disappear through the rain, wondering why the interaction felt so balanced, as though he offered help without expecting anything in return. She wasn't used to that. Not anymore. A week later, Zariah sat in her car after a prenatal appointment, gripping the steering wheel tightly. The doctor had expressed concern about her rising stress levels, warning her to prioritize rest. The moment the doctor left the room, tears spilled from her eyes, not because she feared for her baby, but because it reminded her she was going through all of this alone. She tried to take deep breaths, but her emotions pushed upward in choking waves. By the time she reached her car, she couldn't hold the tears back. She pressed her forehead to the wheel and cried quietly, shoulders shaking. She didn't hear footsteps until someone gently tapped on her window. She lifted her head quickly, wiping her cheek. It was Colden. Again, his expression softened the moment he saw her red eyes. He didn't open her door. He didn't crowd her space. He simply stood outside in the parking lot, hands in his pockets, letting her know he wasn't leaving. She rolled the window down a little, embarrassed. "I'm sorry, I'm usually not like this." "You don't need to apologize," he said. "You're going through a lot. I can see that." The sincerity in his voice nearly broke her all over again. He leaned slightly closer, not enough to make her uncomfortable, just enough to show he cared. "You don't have to tell me what's wrong. I'm not asking for details. I just wanted you to know you're not alone, even if it feels like it sometimes." Her chest tightened at the unexpected comfort. She whispered, "Thank you." He nodded once. "If you want me to walk with you by the water later, I will. If you want space, that's okay too. Just don't feel like you have to carry everything without a pause." Zariah looked away briefly, blinking back tears, unsure how to handle kindness that didn't come with strings attached. Colden stepped back. "I'll be around. Take your time." He walked away without waiting for her response. Zariah watched him go, realizing something she hadn't felt since Charlotte. Someone finally saw her pain. Not the version others pitied. Not the version Tobias dismissed. Not the version Saren pretended to care for. He saw the version she tried to hide. The woman breaking quietly. The woman holding herself together for her baby. The woman rebuilding from pieces no one else understood. It didn't spark romance. Not yet. It sparked relief. Someone recognized her without expecting anything. Over the next few weeks, Zariah ran into Colden more often. At the waterfront bench, at the market, at the prenatal clinic lobby, once at a small cafe where she ordered decaf tea and he sat reading a book. Each meeting felt unplanned but strangely timely, as if the universe kept placing him in her path at moments she needed grounding. He never pried into her personal life. He never asked about her past. He never questioned her pregnancy. Instead, he talked about simple things. "How far along are you? Beaufort sunsets look better from the East Pier. Did you try that bakery around the corner? There's a bench near the marsh that's always quiet if you need thinking space." His presence didn't overwhelm her. It soothed her. Zariah started relaxing around him in a way that surprised her. She found herself opening up slowly, not about Tobias, not about Saren, not about her mother, but about small things. Movies she liked, foods she craved, how she couldn't sleep on her left side without her back hurting, how she worried about raising a strong child. Colden listened without interrupting, without offering unnecessary advice, without making her feel broken. Each conversation stitched a small piece of her heart back together. And one day, while they walked along the waterfront, she realized something. She didn't feel alone anymore. Beaufort never tried to rush Zariah's healing. The town moved at its own calm rhythm, steady tides, slow afternoons, quiet evenings, and somehow that rhythm began blending into her daily life. She walked a little taller with each sunrise, her breaths growing steadier, her heart slowly stitching itself together. She didn't realize at first how much Colden's presence had started to slip into that rhythm too. Their connection didn't start with flirting or sparks. It started with awareness, two people who didn't know each other's stories, yet could sense the loneliness the other carried. Colden never asked questions about her past, but he noticed the heaviness beneath her smiles. And Zariah noticed something in him too, something gentle, cautious, and familiar. Sometimes, while sitting on the waterfront bench together, he'd speak as though he were choosing every word carefully. "I don't know what you went through," he said once, resting his elbows on his knees as he watched the water sway. "But I get the sense you lost more than one thing at the same time." Zariah's throat tightened, but she didn't look away. "Yeah, something like that." He nodded, letting the silence sit comfortably between them. He didn't push her to elaborate. That was new for her, refreshing even. Tobias had always demanded explanations. Saren had always wanted details for the sake of curiosity, but Colden? He let her choose what to share and when. As her pregnancy progressed, the emotional and physical strain grew heavier. Backaches, swollen feet, late-night anxiety, cravings that hit at strange hours, but for the first time since she discovered she was pregnant, she wasn't dealing with it alone. One Saturday morning, she struggled to reach a jar on the top shelf at the market. Before she could step onto her toes, a familiar voice behind her said, "Need a hand?" She turned and saw Colden lifting the jar down effortlessly. "You're going to hurt yourself trying to climb shelves," he said lightly. She laughed softly. "I wasn't climbing, I was strategizing." "You were about to climb," he teased. She pressed a hand over her belly. "Okay, maybe a little. Let me help," he said, placing the jar in her basket. And that became a subtle theme, him helping without making her feel incapable or fragile. He wasn't trying to be a hero. He wasn't trying to fill a role. He was simply being present. Another day, when her ankles were swollen from a long walk, he noticed the discomfort in her steps. "You need to sit," he said gently, guiding her to a bench. "I'm okay," she insisted out of habit. He raised an eyebrow. "You're limping," she sighed in defeat. "Fine, maybe a little." "Put your feet up," he suggested. She hesitated, embarrassed. "In public?" He laughed. "Zariah, you're growing a whole human. Public rules don't apply." That made her smile, a real smile that reached her eyes. Sometimes he brought her herbal tea after her prenatal classes. Sometimes he walked her to her car when she looked tired. Sometimes he simply sat beside her at the pier while she stared at the horizon, letting her exist without expectation. He never made a move, never hinted at romance, never crossed boundaries. But every small gesture planted a seed of comfort she hadn't felt in a long time. And that seed was where trust began. While Zariah slowly built a new life in Beaufort, hundreds of miles away, the cracks in Tobias and Saren's rushed marriage widened. It started small, arguments over bills, strained conversations, little resentments bubbling beneath the surface. Tobias had expected marriage with Saren to feel like an upgrade. He assumed Saren admired him, understood him better than Zariah did, and would feed the ego he desperately clung to. But he discovered something quickly. Saren liked the idea of Tobias. The real Tobias frustrated her. She didn't enjoy cooking for him. She didn't enjoy his long work hours. She didn't enjoy the fact that marrying him brought no social benefits, and she certainly didn't enjoy his obsession with status, an obsession she encouraged until she saw how empty it made him. Their arguments grew louder. Their silences grew longer. Their affection faded fast. Tobias snapped at her for overspending. Saren snapped back about his lack of ambition. The love they claimed to share was never real. It was built on convenience, insecurity, and mutual dissatisfaction. And underneath all of that, something else gnawed at Tobias's conscience. Zariah had disappeared. He didn't like that. Not because he cared about her well-being, but because he hated not knowing what she was doing, where she went, or what she had left behind. The marriage he abandoned so easily now felt like unfinished business, and the thought of her walking away without giving him closure irritated him beyond reason. One night, Saren caught him scrolling through old photos of Zariah on his phone. "Why are you looking at her pictures?" Saren snapped. "I'm not looking at her," he muttered. "I'm trying to understand something." "What's there to understand? You divorced her." He clenched his jaw. She left, without saying anything, without even reacting. Maybe because she was devastated? Saren shot back. He glared at her. "You wouldn't understand." The argument stretched until neither of them wanted to sleep in the same room, and as Saren stormed off, a thought hit Tobias. What if Zariah had money somewhere? What if she hid something before leaving? What if she disappeared because she didn't want him to have access to it? He became obsessed. He asked around quietly, searching for clues. He drove by her old house twice. He even called one of her cousins pretending to check in, but no one knew where she went. No one could reach her. And that unsettled him more than he cared to admit. Meanwhile, in Beaufort, Zariah found her days becoming subtly intertwined with Colden's. Not romantically, not yet, but through a steady companionship that brought her comfort. He had his own story, though he rarely spoke about it. He hinted at leaving a stressful job. He hinted at losing someone he cared about, though he never gave details. He hinted at feeling burnt out from a life that demanded more than it offered. Zariah didn't press, just as he didn't press her. Two broken people who respected each other's wounds, that was the quiet magic of their connection. He noticed little things about her. The way she placed her hand over her stomach when she felt nervous. The way she looked down when embarrassment hit. The way she inhaled deeply before talking about anything personal. The way grief sometimes flickered across her expression without warning. He adjusted to her unspoken needs seamlessly, as if reading cues she didn't vocalize. Once, during dinner at a small seafood spot, she rubbed her lower back discreetly. Colden noticed and asked, "You want to head out? I can get the check." She blinked. "How did you know I'm uncomfortable?" "You always shift in your seat when your back hurts," he said gently. She looked away, touched by the fact that he paid attention without making her feel studied. They walked outside afterward, the evening breeze cool against her skin. "You know," he said, hands in his pockets, "you're doing better than you think." She shook her head. "Some days I feel like I'm barely holding on." "That's what strength looks like sometimes," he replied. She didn't argue because for once, she believed it. Trust didn't come easily for her anymore. Tobias had shattered that muscle, and Saren had crushed the remnants. But slowly, cautiously, Zariah began allowing Colden into the spaces she guarded most tightly. Not deep secrets, not painful history, not the truth about her mother or the betrayal, but small truths. "I couldn't sleep last night," she admitted one afternoon during their walk. "I miss my mom the most in the morning. I'm scared sometimes, not of giving birth, of being a mother. I feel like people see me as fragile now." Each admission was like handing him a fragile piece of her heart. And each time, he held it gently. "You're allowed to feel afraid," he said once. "It doesn't make you weak, it makes you honest." Another time he said, "You don't have to be strong every minute of every day. No one can do that." And on a day she cried unexpectedly, overwhelmed by a flood of emotions, he didn't reach for her without permission. Instead, he asked softly, "You want a hug?" She nodded. It was the first time she let herself be held in months. She didn't break, she breathed. And that was enough. By the time her 6th month arrived, something had changed, not loudly, not noticeably to others, but deeply within Zariah. She didn't flinch when Colden walked beside her. She didn't hide her feelings as fiercely. She didn't see him as a stranger anymore. Meanwhile, Tobias grew increasingly agitated. Saren grew increasingly resentful. Their marriage grew increasingly fragile. Two worlds moving in opposite directions. Zariah's world, slowly healing. Tobias and Saren's world, slowly collapsing. And though none of them knew it yet, their paths would eventually collide again in ways none of them expected. But for now, Zariah allowed herself to breathe, to trust, to exist without fear for the first time in a long while. And as she sat beside Colden on the waterfront bench one warm evening, she realized she wasn't healed yet, but she was no longer broken alone. The sky over Beaufort was cloudy that morning, the kind of gray that hinted at rain but never fully committed. Zariah stood by her apartment window, staring at the water outside as gentle waves rippled through the marsh. The letter from her mother lay open on the kitchen table, the same letter that had changed the direction of her life without warning. "You are the heir to everything." She reread the line for the 5th time that morning. The words didn't grow less surreal. They didn't feel lighter. They carried weight, a weight she wasn't sure her heart was ready to hold. The knock at her door broke the quiet. When she opened it, the same estate representative from Charlotte stood there, dressed in a dark suit, holding another envelope in a thin leather briefcase. "Good morning, Miss Caldwell. Everything is arranged. Your mother's trustees are waiting for you in New York." Zariah blinked. "New York? As in today?" "Yes. Your mother's instructions were clear. Once you opened the letter, a meeting had to follow." Zariah felt her heartbeat climb. She wasn't ready. She was pregnant, emotionally fragile, still healing from betrayal. But the woman continued. "Your flight leaves from Savannah in 3 hours. Transportation is waiting." Zariah stepped back, processing. She wanted time. She wanted to think. But something in her mother's words, "Your time is coming," pushed her forward. She packed slowly. Black maternity dress, a long coat, her journals, her mother's letter. She held her stomach before leaving. Okay, baby. We're doing this together. The city felt like another universe compared to Beaufort. Loud, restless, electric. Taxis honked, crowds moved fast, and skyscrapers swallowed the sky. The car sent for her drove into the Manhattan Financial District, past tall glass buildings reflecting gray clouds overhead. They pulled up to a tower on Wall Street, 40 floors high. Black marble exterior, gold-trimmed revolving doors. Inside, security escorted her up to the 27th floor. When the elevator opened, she stepped into a boardroom with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the New York Stock Exchange. 3 people sat at a long table, the trustees her mother had appointed years ago. Middle-aged, calm, professionally distant. They stood when she entered. "Miss Caldwell," one said gently, "please, take your time." "We know this is a lot." She sat slowly, her breath shaky. "We're here," another trustee said, "to honor your mother's wishes. She built an empire unlike anything the world has ever seen, intentionally hidden, intentionally protected." Zariah swallowed. "I still don't understand. My mother, she lived so simply." "That was by design," the trustee replied. "Your mother believed wealth draws danger and attention. She wanted you to live freely until the time came." The largest trustee, a tall man with soft eyes, placed a thick binder in front of her. "This," he said, "is the Caldwell Global Portfolio." Zariah opened it carefully. Page after page revealed naval shipping contracts held in European territories, technology patents registered under shell corporations, real estate holdings in over 14 countries, offshore energy investments, minority ownership in 3 major U.S. banks, a private Long Island estate worth more than most entire companies, billions spread through foundations she never knew existed. And one final number at the bottom, 1.04 trillion. Zariah pressed a hand to her chest. She felt faint. This can't be right." "It is," the trustee replied gently. "Your mother started with small businesses, but she invested quietly, strategically, globally. She reinvested every profit. She stayed out of the public eye. That's how she built something no one expected." Another trustee added, "Your mother believed the next leader needed compassion, not greed, intelligence, not arrogance, and above all, strength born from humility." Zariah blinked back tears. "She never told me." "She wanted you to grow without the burden of expectations," the woman explained. "She wanted you to have a human life, not a financial identity." The binder felt heavier than anything she had ever held. Zariah whispered, "How am I supposed to manage all this? I'm pregnant. I'm just trying to get through every day." "You don't manage it alone," the trustee said. "You inherit leadership, not pressure. A team runs the operations. You're the heart, the vision." Her chest tightened. "I'm not sure I have that." Another trustee smiled faintly. "Your mother disagreed." After the Manhattan meeting, the trustees arranged transport to Long Island to show Zariah the private estate her mother purchased quietly under an alias. The car pulled through tall iron gates, winding down a private road lined with oak trees. At the end stood a mansion, wide balconies, white stone pillars, sprawling gardens, a private lake shimmering behind it. Zariah stepped out of the car, stunned. "I can't live here," she whispered. "You don't have to," the estate representative replied, "but you should know what belongs to you." They walked through the mansion, room after room, a library filled with rare books, a music room her mother never mentioned, a nursery she paused in, overcome by emotion, a study containing handwritten letters her mother once drafted but never mailed. Zariah felt a lump in her throat. Her mother planned everything, prepared everything, protected everything, all while living like an ordinary woman in Charlotte, cooking at home, attending church, dressing plainly, giving quietly. Zariah touched the window frame and whispered, "Ma, why didn't you tell me?" She didn't know if her heart hurt more from the inheritance or from the reminder that her mother would never walk these halls with her. Back in Manhattan, the trustees asked one final question. "Miss Caldwell, are you ready to accept the position of principal beneficiary and successor?" Zariah hesitated. She wasn't sure of anything lately. Her mother was gone. Her marriage was shattered. Her best friend had betrayed her. Her baby was on the way. Her emotions were unsteady. But one truth rose above everything. If her mother believed she could lead, then maybe she could. She exhaled slowly. Yes, I'll do it. The trustees exchanged relieved glances. Your mother chose well, one said softly. But something unexpected happened inside Zariah, something she didn't expect to feel. Purpose. Not revenge, not ego, not pride. Purpose. For the first time since her mother's death, since Tobias's betrayal, since Saren's abandonment, she felt her spirit rise again. She felt a strength she thought she lost. Her mother had built the foundation. Now she was meant to continue the story. And though she had no idea how much chaos would erupt when the world learned the truth, one thing was certain. Her old life was gone, and a new one had begun. Zariah returned to Beaufort thinking she would have at least a few weeks to process the massive shift in her life. She planned to reread the documents slowly, understand the structure of the empire, and decide how involved she wanted to be before the world ever knew her name. But secrets, especially ones this large, rarely stay contained. 3 days after she returned from Manhattan, it happened. Not with a press conference, not with a planned announcement, not with her approval. It leaked. A junior staffer from a financial auditing firm overheard a conversation between two trustees. That staffer told a friend. That friend posted a vague message online. Within hours, a financial blogger picked it up. Within a day, 3 major outlets began digging. And by that evening, one headline appeared across every major news platform. Young black woman identified as sole heir to secret trillion-dollar empire. Zariah was scrolling through her phone after dinner when her notifications exploded. Her screen lit up with messages, tags, and alerts, thousands of them. She frowned, confused. Then she clicked the trending link and saw her own face next to the headline. Her breath caught in her throat. The article included a photo of her leaving the Manhattan Tower. The phrase undisclosed heir plastered beneath it. Mentions of hidden wealth, offshore holdings, and global investments. Speculation about how a woman so young came into such power. Commentary about her identity, especially as a black woman inheriting something historically held by wealthy white dynasties. Zariah pressed a hand to her chest as she scrolled. This can't be happening, she whispered. Her heart pounded painfully. She had wanted privacy. She had wanted time. She had wanted space to process her mother's legacy quietly before stepping into the public eye. Instead, she was trending online. Zariah Caldwell trillion-dollar heirish hidden fortune financial shock. Within minutes, the story spread across social platforms. People posted reactions ranging from disbelief to admiration. This is unreal. A black woman inheriting $1 trillion? Historic. We need to know more about her. Where has she been hiding? Her life just changed forever. If only they knew how true that last statement was. By nightfall, news vans parked outside her Beaufort apartment. Reporters paced up and down the block. Helicopter footage showed her building. Bloggers created videos speculating about her life. Economists debated the credibility of the wealth. Financial analysts tried breaking down the empire. Some critics questioned whether a woman could lead it. Others accused her mother of deception. And still others praised Marvell's secrecy as genius. Everyone wanted a piece of the story. Everyone wanted access to Zariah. She stayed inside, curtains drawn, heart pounding uncontrollably. Her hands shook as she reached for her phone to turn it off. Before she could, it buzzed with a call from a number she didn't recognize. She declined. Another call came immediately. Then a third. The noise felt suffocating. For months, she had lived quietly. Now the world was knocking at her door. Her baby shifted in her belly, responding to her stress. She placed a hand over the movement and whispered, "It's okay, I'm here." But even she wasn't sure she believed it. Miles away, in a small townhouse Tobias and Saren shared, unhappily, Saren sat scrolling on her phone when she froze. Her jaw dropped. Her eyes widened. The color drained from her face. "Tobias," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Come here. Now." He walked into the room, irritated. "What now, Saren?" "I'm busy." She shoved her phone into his hand. He frowned, glanced at the screen, then gasped. Zariah Caldwell, sole heir to a global trillion-dollar fortune. At first, he thought it was fake. A parody. A scam headline. But then he scrolled, and saw the photos, and saw the financial analysis, and saw the global reaction. His throat tightened so hard he nearly choked. No, this isn't possible, he stammered. Saren's hand flew to her mouth. Tobias, we divorced her. He dropped onto the couch, staring at the screen in disbelief. She inherited her mother's money, $1 trillion, $1 trillion. Saren panicked. We made a mistake. Tobias, we made a huge mistake. He shook his head violently. No, she wouldn't keep this from me. There must be a misunderstanding. Maybe she just stepped into the role after the divorce. Saren glared at him. Why would her mother leave her that? Why didn't she tell us? Why didn't you know? He rubbed his forehead, trembling. She didn't know. She couldn't have known. She would have told me. Saren snapped back. Or maybe she didn't trust you. The truth, the embarrassing, humiliating truth, began pressing into Tobias's mind. He had left a woman pregnant, grieving, and alone. And she turned out to be one of the wealthiest people on earth. He married Saren 2 weeks later, out of desire, out of ego, out of emotional escape. Now he saw what he traded. Security for chaos, stability for anxiety, a future for a downward spiral. Saren began pacing frantically. What are we going to do, Tobias? People will know we betrayed her. They're going to talk about us. They'll drag our names. Tobias wasn't thinking about reputation. He was thinking about access. How do I contact her? He whispered. Saren froze. Tobias, don't be ridiculous. We have no right. She was my wife, he insisted. I deserve closure. You don't deserve anything, she snapped. You left her, and now you want her back because of money? Tobias didn't respond. He didn't have to. His eyes said everything. That night, Tobias didn't sleep. He searched every photo of Zariah he could find, every article about her mother, every rumor about the inheritance, every blog breakdown of the empire. He clicked through hundreds of comments, reading praise, speculation, envy. The more he read, the more he felt something burning in his chest. Not love, not regret, but a twisted mixture of entitlement and disbelief. How could she not tell me? He muttered. How could she walk away like that? Saren watched him from across the room, her stomach knotting. She already suspected Tobias still compared her to Zariah. But now, with this revelation, everything snapped. You're obsessed, Saren said bitterly. She didn't even give me a chance to talk to her. He shot back. You filed for divorce. He ignored that. Saren continued. She gave you nothing because you gave her nothing. You left her when she needed you the most. But Tobias wasn't listening. His mind was spinning. I need to know where she is, he whispered. Saren's fear turned into desperation. Tobias, let it go. We can rebuild. We can work things out. He didn't answer. Because he wasn't thinking about Saren at all. Only Zariah. While Tobias spiraled, Zariah sat on the floor of her apartment with her knees drawn close, her breathing uneven. Her baby shifted anxiously in her belly, sensing her distress. A knock came at the door. At first, she didn't move. She had ignored all knocks that evening. Reporters had found the building, calling out her name like she owed them answers. But this knock was different, gentle, rhythmic, patient. It was Colden. Zariah, it's me, he said softly through the door. You don't have to open it. Just let me know you're okay. She wiped her tears but didn't stand. Colden, I don't think I'm okay. He didn't push inside, didn't demand anything. He simply said, Can I sit outside your door for a while? Her throat tightened. Why? So you're not facing this alone. She closed her eyes, overwhelmed by the simplicity of his compassion. Okay, she whispered. So he sat, right outside her apartment, not touching the doorknob, not invading her space, just being present. Through the door, he spoke gently. I saw the news. I know things feel out of control, but you didn't do anything wrong. You don't owe the world explanations before you're ready. She cried softly. He didn't react. He let it flow. People will talk, he continued, but you're still you, the woman who journals at the pier, the woman who smiles when her baby kicks, the woman who survived heartbreak but still gets up every morning. Her tears turned into quiet sobs. Colden's voice softened even more. You're strong, Zariah, stronger than you think, and whatever this becomes, you don't have to face it without someone in your corner. Slowly she stood and opened the door. Colden looked up from the floor. His eyes softened when he saw her tear-stained cheeks. "I'm right here," he said, and he stayed the night, not inside, not too close, but on the couch with her permission, just so she wouldn't wake up alone in a world that suddenly felt too loud. The morning after the media storm hit, Beaufort felt different, louder, heavier, unsettled. Reporters waited on nearby sidewalks, cameras angled toward her apartment building. Neighbors whispered. Cars slowed as they passed, hoping to catch a glimpse of the mysterious trillion-dollar heiress. Zariah stayed inside, curtains drawn, lights dimmed. She spent most of the morning sitting on her couch with a blanket draped over her shoulders, one hand resting on her belly, the other clutching her mother's letter. Colden had slept lightly on her couch, waking at every sound. When she quietly tried to rise from the couch at dawn, he lifted his head. "You okay?" he asked, voice soft with sleep. She nodded, though it wasn't true. "Just thinking." "Want to talk about it?" he asked gently. She hesitated. For weeks now, Colden had been her anchor, quietly consistent, patient, present. But she hadn't told him anything about her past. Nothing about Tobias. Nothing about Seren. Nothing about her mother's empire. Nothing about why her face was suddenly plastered across financial tabloids. She wasn't sure if telling him would change everything. And yet, she realized she didn't want to hide anymore. She didn't want him to care for her without understanding the weight she carried. She took a breath. "Colden, there's a lot you don't know." He sat up slowly, giving her his full attention but not crowding her. "I'm listening," he said. Zariah looked down at her hands. "Before I came here, before everything fell apart, I was married." Colden didn't flinch, didn't shift, didn't react with surprise. He simply nodded once, encouraging her to continue. "His name is Tobias. We were together for years, and my best friend since childhood, Seren, she was always in our lives." Her voice cracked slightly. "I thought they cared about me. I really did." Colden's eyes softened. "What happened?" She exhaled, shakily. "My mother died suddenly. I was pregnant. I was heartbroken. And instead of being there for me, Tobias pulled away. He couldn't handle my grief, or the pregnancy, or maybe he just didn't want to." Colden waited quietly, giving her time. A week after the funeral, she whispered, "He served me divorce papers." Colden winced slightly, not in disgust, but in sympathy. "Zariah, I'm sorry, that's cruel. There's more." She swallowed hard. 2 weeks later, Tobias married Seren. Colden inhaled sharply, eyebrows lifting in stunned disbelief. "Your best friend?" She nodded with a hollow laugh. "Some best friend, right?" He shook his head. "That's not friendship. That's betrayal." The word hung in the air like a truth she had avoided saying aloud. She continued, "I moved here because I felt broken. I needed to escape. I needed peace for my baby. But I thought my story ended there, just a painful divorce and a quiet new life." Colden leaned forward slightly. "But that's not everything, is it?" She looked at her mother's letter, the neat handwriting that felt like a warm hand on her shoulder. "My mother," she whispered, "was a trillionaire." Colden blinked. Slowly. Once. Twice. Not with shock, but with careful processing. "I didn't know," she continued. "No one knew. She lived simply, never talked about money, never flaunted anything. But she spent decades building a hidden global empire, and she left all of it. To me." Colden didn't interrupt her. His face didn't shift into greed, awe, or discomfort. He just listened. When the news leaked, she said, everything exploded. Reporters came, social media blasted my name everywhere. People started treating me like I'm something I'm not. I didn't choose any of this. Her eyes filled with tears. "I'm overwhelmed, scared. I don't know if I'm strong enough to handle it all. I don't know who to trust. I don't even know what my life is anymore." Colden stood slowly and walked toward her. Not fast, not assuming, but with quiet care. He knelt in front of her, eyes level with hers. "Zariah," he said softly, "look at me." She lifted her eyes, unsure of what she'd see. What she found was steadiness. "Your past doesn't scare me," he said simply. Her breath caught. I don't care about your ex-husband. I don't care about your so-called best friend. I don't care about the money, the empire, the headlines. None of that changes the woman I've been talking to for weeks." He placed a gentle hand on the couch beside her, not touching her yet, just grounding the moment. "You are kind," he continued. "You are strong, even when you don't feel like it. You show up for your baby every single day. You survived heartbreak that would crush most people. You rebuilt yourself from pieces, slowly, quietly, bravely." His voice softened even further. "And if the world is loud right now, I'll help you find the quiet." Tears slid down her cheeks. Not from pain this time, from relief. "Colden," she whispered. "You don't have to trust me all at once," he said. "Just trust that I'm not going anywhere." Her heart felt something she hadn't felt in months, the beginning of safety. Later that evening, after hours of talking and finally feeling the weight in her chest lighten, Zariah stood to stretch her back. She made it halfway across the room before a sharp tightening shot through her abdomen. She gasped, gripping the back of a chair. Colden rushed to her side. "Zariah, what's wrong?" She inhaled sharply. "I don't know. My stomach just tightened." "Is it the baby?" he asked gently. Another tightening. Stronger this time. A contraction. Her breathing quickened. I think it's time." Colden didn't panic. His voice stayed calm. "Okay, sit down. I'll grab your hospital bag." She groaned as another contraction hit. "I didn't think it would happen so soon." "Babies pick their own timing," he said, grabbing her bag. "Let's go. I'm right here." He helped her into the car and buckled her seatbelt carefully. She winced as another contraction rolled through her body, gripping the door handle tightly. "It's okay," Colden murmured. "Breathe, in through your nose, out slowly." She followed his rhythm, leaning into his voice like a lifeline. "I'm scared," she whispered. He reached over and squeezed her hand gently. "I'm here. You're not doing this alone." The hospital in Beaufort wasn't large, but the staff moved quickly when Colden rushed her inside. Nurses escorted her to a delivery room, helping her change into a gown while Colden stayed by her side, eyes steady, voice calm. A nurse asked, "Are you the father?" Colden shook his head without hesitation. "No, but I'm her support." The nurse nodded approvingly. "Then stay close. She'll need you." As contractions intensified, Zariah gripped the rails of the bed, tears gathering in her eyes. Pain surged through her like waves, each one stronger than the last. "Colden," she gasped. "It hurts." He took her hand. "Squeeze as hard as you need. I'm not going anywhere." She squeezed. He didn't flinch. Hours passed. Contraction after contraction. Nurses came in and out. Monitors beeped steadily. The room filled with tension, urgency, the heavy rhythm of labor. At one point, when the pain became unbearable, Zariah whispered, "I can't do this." Colden moved closer, brushing a tear from her cheek with the back of his hand, gentle, respectful, never crossing a boundary. "Yes, you can," he whispered. "You already have. Everything you've survived led you here. You are stronger than this moment." Her breathing steadied. "You're not alone," he promised. "I'm right here." After nearly 12 hours, the doctor finally announced, "It's time to push." Zariah cried out as she pushed, tears streaming down her face. Colden held her hand firmly, whispering encouragement. "You're doing incredible. Keep going. You're almost there." One final push, one final cry from Zariah. And then, a new cry filled the room. Her baby's cry. Zariah collapsed back onto the pillows, tears flowing. The nurse placed the tiny baby against her chest. Zariah sobbed softly. Hi, baby. I'm your mom." Colden stepped back slightly, giving her space, but his eyes shone with emotion. He wasn't the father, but in that moment, he admired her strength more deeply than ever before. When she finally looked up at him, cheeks wet with tears, he whispered, "You did it." She smiled softly through exhaustion. "We did it." A nurse asked quietly, "Would you like someone to cut the cord?" Zariah looked at Colden. He froze, shocked she even considered him. "Are you sure?" he asked, voice low. She nodded. "You were here, every step." He swallowed hard and stepped forward. His hands trembled just slightly as he cut the cord, sealing a moment neither of them would ever forget. Later, when Zariah finally rested with her baby asleep on her chest, Colden sat quietly in a chair beside the bed. He didn't look tired, even though he hadn't slept in almost 24 hours. He looked peaceful. "Thank you," she whispered. He shook his head. "Don't thank me. I wanted to be here." Zariah looked down at her newborn, and then back at Colden. "You know, I didn't think I'd ever trust anyone again," she said softly. "But you've shown me what safety feels like." Colden's expression shifted, humbled, touched. "It's all I ever want to give you." If this chapter touched you, please like this video and comment something encouraging for Zariah's journey. Your engagement helps others find these powerful stories and keeps our community growing. The first few weeks after the birth were a whirlwind of soft cries, sleepless nights, warm bottles, and moments of quiet awe. Motherhood wrapped itself around Zariah like a blanket she hadn't realized she needed. Even through exhaustion, she felt a kind of fulfillment she'd never known before. Her baby's tiny fingers curling around hers made every painful memory feel distant, like an old bruise finally fading. Colden visited regularly, always knocking softly before entering, never assuming. He brought meals, diapers, lavender lotion for the baby, and sometimes just company. He carried the baby with a gentleness that surprised even him, walking slow laps around the living room to soothe her. He held her against his chest until she fell asleep, whispering, "You're safe," as if the baby understood him. Zariah often caught herself watching him, not romantically, not with hope for something more, but with gratitude. He had become a comfort in ways she couldn't fully articulate. But where she found peace, Tobias found torment. It started with a single email. Subject, "Zariah, please, we need to talk." Tobias. She didn't open it. The second email came an hour later. "I deserve to know how you're doing. You were my wife. Please respond." She deleted it instantly. Then came the voicemail. "Zariah, it's me. Look, I saw everything online. I didn't know. I had no idea about your mother or anything about the fortune. I didn't leave you because of that. I just made mistakes. Can you call me back?" His voice wavered at the end. But she didn't call back. She didn't even listen to the entire message. The next day he called again, and again, and again. By the end of the week, he had emailed over 20 times and called nearly 40. Zariah blocked his number. It wasn't anger that drove her to do it. It was clarity. He didn't care when she was pregnant. He didn't care when she was grieving. He didn't care when she needed him most. Now that she had something he wanted, status, wealth, access, suddenly he remembered her name. She whispered to herself as she pressed the block button, "You don't get to come back now." Saren's message arrived one evening after Zariah put the baby down to sleep. "Zariah, please, hear me out. I messed up. I shouldn't have gotten involved with Tobias. Things happened fast and I wasn't thinking clearly. I'm so sorry for everything. Please, don't shut me out. We were family." Zariah stared at the message for several minutes, not because she was tempted to forgive, but because she was astonished. Saren believed an apology could erase the betrayal. Saren had been like a sister to her, someone who shared memories of cookouts, braids on the porch, late-night talks about dreams and heartbreaks. She had stood beside Zariah since childhood. Yet when Zariah's world crumbled, Saren didn't hold her. She held Tobias instead. Zariah typed a message but erased it. Her therapist had taught her something important: not every wound deserves a response. She deleted Saren's message without replying. The days that followed were filled with little lessons: how to hold the baby just right, how to bounce gently when she cried, how to swaddle without her wiggling out, how to deepen her breathing when anxiety threatened to return. Her motherhood journey became a place of healing. She woke in the middle of the night to soft newborn cries, not with resentment, but gratitude. The tiny life that depended on her reminded her she had something precious worth protecting from all outside noise. So she guarded her peace fiercely. She unplugged from social media. She forwarded estate emails to the trustees. She avoided watching any coverage about herself. She asked building security to filter visitors. She took long walks along the marsh trail with her baby strapped against her chest, breathing in the marsh air and letting the calmness settle into her bones. People wanted her attention. People wanted her story. People wanted a piece of her, but she owed nothing to anyone. Every ounce of energy she had belonged to her child and her own healing. Though Zariah ignored him, Tobias did not stop. When emails failed, he created new ones. When calls were blocked, he used different numbers. When messages failed, he wrote long paragraphs through third-party channels. At first, the messages were apologetic. "I miss you. We can fix this. I didn't mean to hurt you." Then they grew more desperate. "You didn't tell me about your mother. Why would you keep that from me? You owe me a conversation. It's not right for you to disappear with our history." Our history. Zariah nearly laughed when she read that line. He had erased their history the moment he handed her divorce papers while she was pregnant and grieving. But Tobias's messages grew darker with obsession. "Where are you? I know you're hiding. Why are you ignoring me?" His need for access to her life became transparent. He wanted the proximity, not the person. He wanted the influence, not the relationship. And deep down, Zariah knew the truth. If she had returned home poor, Tobias wouldn't be begging. He'd be silent. That reminder hardened something inside her. Not bitterness, not anger, but empowerment. She whispered to her baby one night, "We don't go backward, only forward." Colden's involvement with the baby grew in the most natural, unforced way. One afternoon when she struggled to rest, Colden offered, "I'll walk her around the marsh. You take a nap. I'll stay close." She hesitated. Motherhood made her protective, but something in his presence felt trustworthy. She handed the baby to him gently. "Be careful with her head." He smiled softly. "I've been watching you for weeks. I know the drill." He held the baby with both hands, cradling her carefully against his chest. The baby blinked up at him, curious and calm. Colden whispered, "Let's go on an adventure, little one." When they returned an hour later, Zariah awoke from one of the deepest naps she'd had in months. Colden whispered, "She fell asleep on my chest. I didn't want to move her." Zariah stared at him, the man standing barefoot in her living room, gently rocking her child with a tenderness that softened her entire spirit. "You don't have to do all this," she said softly. He handed the baby back with a slow nod. "I know, but I want to." That evening, when the baby cried inconsolably, Colden was the one who figured out that she stopped crying when softly bouncing near the window. "She likes the light," he said with a smirk. Another day, when Zariah struggled to assemble a crib, Colden rolled up his sleeves and said, "Step aside. I've got this." He built the crib while humming gently, a habit he didn't even realize he had until Zariah teased him for it. He flushed slightly. "Sorry. I do that when I'm focused." She smiled. "It's nice." Soon the baby began recognizing his voice. Her tiny eyes followed him. Her little fingers curled around his whenever he reached out. He wasn't her father, but he was something stable, comforting, dependable. And Zariah saw it clearly. Colden wasn't replacing anything. He was adding something. One morning, Zariah received a message through a new delivery app she had never used before. It read, "Zariah, I know you hate me, I don't blame you, but Tobias is losing it. He's obsessed with finding you. I just want peace, please. Can we meet? Seren." Zariah stared at the message. Seren didn't want reconciliation. Seren wanted safety, for herself, her reputation, her comfort. Her apology was just another attempt to save her own image. Instead of replying, Zariah forwarded the message to her security team and blocked the sender. She whispered to her baby, "We don't entertain the past." That night, Tobias sent a message with a tone that made Zariah's stomach tighten. "Zariah, I know you have a child. I deserve to meet my baby." She stared at the screen. He didn't ask how she was. He didn't ask if she was healthy. He didn't ask her child's name. He said "my baby," claiming a life he abandoned before it even entered the world. Zariah closed her eyes, whispering, "Not today, not ever." She deleted the message, placed her phone down, and lifted her baby from the crib. Holding her close, she whispered, "You're safe with me. No one touches you unless their heart is pure." And in that moment, Colden walked into the room with a warm bottle and the softest expression she had ever seen on him. "Need help?" he asked quietly. She nodded, grateful, not just for the bottle, but for the presence, the steadiness, the unspoken promise in his eyes. The Caldwell headquarters in Manhattan had not known peace since the world learned the empire existed. Every week brought another interview request, another financial publication begging for insight, another political leader wanting a private meeting. The building's lobby stayed packed with cameras, microphones, and reporters, hoping for a glimpse of the woman whose inheritance had rewritten global economic predictions. But today was different. Today was Zariah's first in-person board meeting since giving birth. Security had been tripled. News vans lined the street. Helicopters hovered above the skyscrapers. The entire financial district murmured with anticipation. Rumors spread fast. Zariah Caldwell is coming in today. The heiress will appear in public for the first time since the baby arrived. Is the baby the new heir? Will she speak to the press? All of Manhattan buzzed, but none of the reporters knew the real storm approaching. Only 2 people were desperate enough to make the trip uninvited: Tobias and Saren. It started with murmurs near the lobby entrance. A group of reporters suddenly turned their cameras toward the sliding doors. Then, a loud surge of voices erupted. There he is. That's her ex-husband. And the woman he married. Get that on camera. Tobias stepped through the doors wearing a suit that didn't fit quite right anymore. His once perfectly groomed appearance looked strained. Too much gel, forced confidence, dark circles under his eyes. Saren stood beside him in a blouse that had clearly been chosen to appear soft and remorseful. But her expression betrayed her. Fear, desperation, and bitterness flickered across her face. A reporter shouted, "Tobias, why are you here today?" He forced a smile. "I'm here to see Zariah. Does she know you're coming?" Another called out. His jaw tightened. "She will." Saren stepped closer, whispering urgently, "Just stay calm. Don't let them see you nervous." But Tobias was nervous. It showed in the way he tugged at his sleeves, the way his eyes darted around as if looking for a familiar face among the cameras. Together, they pushed through the crowd toward security. 2 security guards blocked the entrance to the private elevators. "Names?" one asked firmly. "Tobias Granger," he said, lifting his chin. "I'm Zariah's husband." The guard didn't blink. "She filed divorce paperwork a long time ago." Saren stepped forward with a shaky smile. "We're here to make peace. She'll want to see us." The guard didn't even look at her. "You are not on the list of approved visitors." Tobias tried to force his way through. "Look, she needs to hear what I have to say." But the guard placed a firm hand on his chest. "Step back." The cameras caught everything. Tobias's frustration, Saren's trembling lip, the visible panic in both of their eyes. Reporters shouted questions. "Did you leave her while she was pregnant? Why come back now? Do you regret divorcing her? Are you trying to get access to the baby or the fortune? Does this visit have anything to do with your recent financial troubles?" Tobias snapped. "You know nothing about our situation." Saren grabbed his arm. "Tobias, stop." But he had already stepped into the trap of public embarrassment. Desperate, Saren turned to security again. "Please, we just need 5 minutes with her." The guard spoke into an earpiece, waited for a response, then said, "Miss Caldwell says she will see you." Tobias straightened, relief washing over him. But the guard continued, "You will be escorted by 4 guards. You will not be allowed to wander. You will not approach her without permission. Do you understand?" Tobias nodded quickly. Saren swallowed hard. "Yes, we understand." The guards flanked them and led them toward the private elevator, while cameras flashed wildly, capturing every step of their humiliation. Upstairs, the boardroom buzzed with executives discussing global holdings, charitable foundations, and new strategic expansions. None of them expected the personal drama about to unfold. Colden stood near the back of the room, holding a leather folder of financial notes. Though he never tried to enter Zariah's corporate world, she had invited him today for moral support. He looked both proud and protective, aware that public attention terrified her, but also aware she was stronger than she believed. When a guard approached her quietly and whispered, "They're here," her entire body stilled. She didn't look surprised. She didn't look rattled. She looked ready. Colden stepped closer. "Do you want me to stay?" She met his eyes and gave a small nod. "Yes. Stay." Her baby was home with trusted caretakers, safe and far from this moment of public reckoning. Zariah stood tall, adjusted the cuffs of her blazer, and whispered, "Let them in." The door opened. Tobias walked in first and froze. There she was, the woman he once dismissed, the woman he abandoned in grief, the woman he divorced with cold detachment, now standing in a penthouse boardroom overlooking Manhattan. Calm, composed, breathtakingly powerful. Zariah didn't flinch. Saren stepped in behind him. The moment her eyes met Zariah's, her face crumpled with a mixture of regret and envy. The entire room watched silently. Tobias spoke first. "Zariah." His voice cracked. "Thank you for agreeing to see us." She raised a hand slightly. "Let's keep this brief." He swallowed hard. I made mistakes. I see that now. I didn't know what you were going through. I should have been there. I should have supported you." Zariah said nothing. He continued, voice trembling. "But we had years together. We shared a life. We can't let everything end like this." Her expression didn't change. Saren stepped forward with a tearful voice. "Zariah, please. I'm so sorry. I shouldn't have." Zariah cut her a look so calm, so controlled, it made Saren's voice die in her throat. "You're apologizing to save your image," Zariah said quietly. "Not because you care." Saren's face flushed red. "That's not true." "It is," Zariah answered. "You left me when I needed you most. That tells me everything." Tobias took a shaky step forward. "Please, Zariah. We just want a chance to explain. To make things right." Zariah turned to him fully now. "Make things right?" She repeated softly. "The day you placed divorce papers on my dining table, while I was pregnant, grieving and alone, that was the day you chose your future. You made it without me." He opened his mouth to speak. She raised a hand. "And 2 weeks later, you married Saren. That decision spoke louder than anything you could say now." Silence stretched across the room. Colden watched the exchange, his jaw tight, his hands curled at his sides, not out of anger, but out of protective instinct. A reporter's camera outside the glass hallway caught Tobias's defeated posture. The executives around the room exchanged knowing glances. Zariah continued, voice firm but calm. "You both left when I had nothing. No mother, no support, no stability, no one to lean on." She stepped closer, not threatening, but powerful in her truth. "Now that I have everything, you want access?" Tobias's jaw trembled. "No, it's not like that." "It is exactly like that." Saren wiped her eyes. "Zariah, please. We were confused. We made mistakes. We didn't think." "You didn't care," Zariah corrected. "You cared about yourselves. And now you care about my name, my position, my child's inheritance." Saren choked. "We're not here for money." Zariah held her gaze. "Then why are you here?" Saren's eyes darted toward Tobias. The answer exposed itself without words. Zariah inhaled softly. "This conversation is over." Tobias stepped forward one last time, desperation trembling in his voice. "Zariah, please, don't ruin us. We were wrong, but we can fix this." Those were the exact words he had spoken in the hook scene, the moment that launched the story. And now, standing before him with every piece of her dignity restored, Zariah finally answered without shaking. "The day you left me pregnant and grieving, that was the day you fixed your fate." The room fell silent. Tobias's expression collapsed. Saren covered her mouth as tears spilled. 2 security guards walked forward at Zariah's gesture. "Please escort them out," she said quietly. Tobias reached out helplessly. "Zariah." She didn't turn. She didn't tremble. She didn't cry. She simply walked back to the head of the boardroom table, where she now belonged. Colden exhaled slowly, admiration settling in his eyes. As the guards removed Tobias and Saren, reporters outside captured the moment they were led out of the building. Shoulders slumped, faces pale, regret etched deeper than anything wealth could fix. The irony was complete. They didn't leave a broken woman. They left a rising powerhouse. And now they wanted back in. They never would. The confrontation at Caldwell headquarters had been humiliating for Tobias and Saren, but it didn't stop them. If anything, it ignited something desperate and reckless inside Tobias, a frantic obsession he no longer attempted to hide. After security escorted them out of the building, reporters swarmed them on the sidewalk. Lights flashed, microphones shoved forward. Voices piled on top of each other. "Tobias, how does it feel to be rejected by your ex-wife? Are you trying to claim access to her empire?" Is it true you abandoned her during pregnancy? Saren, were you aware she was expecting when you married Tobias? Saren flinched under every question. Tobias pushed past the crowd with a stiff jaw, muttering, no comment again and again. But by the time they reached the street, the headlines were already spreading. Online, Zariah Caldwell rejects ex-husband in public showdown. Tobias Granger escorted out of Caldwell headquarters. Saren Wade breaks down outside Manhattan high-rise. Their humiliation was televised, clipped, shared, reposted, and dissected. And Tobias snapped. 2 days later, a thick envelope arrived at Zariah's penthouse. Colden brought it to her gently. This came from a law office. Zariah opened it slowly. Inside was a petition filed by Tobias, requesting partial custody and parental rights to the minor child. She stared at the paper for several long seconds. Not in shock, she expected something like this eventually, but in disbelief at the audacity. Colden exhaled sharply. He abandoned you. He has no grounds. Zariah nodded. He doesn't care about fatherhood. He cares about access. Colden's jaw tightened. We'll fight this. You won't face it alone. She appreciated the certainty in his voice. Not forceful, not controlling, just steady. She looked down at her baby sleeping in the bassinet next to her and whispered, I won't let him touch you. Manhattan's family court was packed the morning of the hearing. Photographers lined the courthouse steps. Reporters stood behind metal barricades holding microphones. Inside, the courtroom filled with murmurs as Tobias entered with a lawyer, a man who looked more confident than his client. Saren trailed behind Tobias, not making eye contact with anyone. Tobias wore a suit that tried to project responsibility, but his jittery behavior undermined the performance. Saren wore minimal makeup, hoping to appear remorseful. When Zariah entered, the noise faded. She walked in with quiet dignity, her hair pulled into a low bun, her posture straight, her expression calm. Colden walked beside her, not touching her, but close enough to show support without crossing any personal boundaries. People whispered, "That's her. She's even more composed in person. She doesn't look intimidated at all." Zariah sat beside her attorney, rested her hands on the table, and fixed her gaze forward. She didn't look at Tobias once. The judge began by reviewing the petition. Tobias Granger is seeking partial custody and visitation rights, the judge said. Miss Caldwell opposes. Tobias's lawyer stood. Your Honor, my client simply wishes to be involved in the life of his child. He regrets past mistakes and wants to step up and provide support. Zariah didn't move. The judge raised an eyebrow. Mr. Granger, did you support Miss Caldwell during her pregnancy? Tobias shifted nervously. Your Honor, I wasn't aware she needed. Did you leave her while she was pregnant? The judge asked directly. Tobias hesitated. Things were complicated. The judge narrowed his eyes. That is not an answer. The courtroom fell silent. Tobias's lawyer jumped in. Your Honor, my client acknowledges he mishandled the situation emotionally. But he has since realized the importance of being present. The judge looked unimpressed. According to Miss Caldwell, Mr. Granger also remarried shortly after the divorce. Whispers erupted around the courtroom. The judge turned to Saren. Is that correct? Saren swallowed hard. Yes. The judge continued reading. Ms. Caldwell carried the pregnancy alone, relocated alone, gave birth alone. Colden's jaw clenched. Tobias's lawyer cleared his throat. Your Honor, if I may. No, the judge said firmly. Mr. Granger will answer. Tobias wiped his palms on his pants. I should have been there. I just wasn't thinking. But I'm here now. The judge tilted his head. You're here now because Miss Caldwell inherited a global empire, correct? Tobias's eyes widened. No, Your Honor. I'm here because it's the right thing to do. The judge stared at him for a long moment, the kind of silence that exposed truth better than any argument. Her attorney stood. Your Honor, Ms. Caldwell would like to speak. Zariah rose slowly, every movement graceful and controlled. She addressed the judge clearly. I am not denying his rights out of spite. I am protecting my child. The courtroom grew silent. Tobias left me when I needed him most. He knew I was pregnant. He handed me divorce papers a week after my mother died. 2 weeks later, he married someone else. He never checked on me, never called, never asked if the baby was healthy. Her voice didn't shake. "He is not here to be a father. He is here because he saw a headline." Cold gasps filled the room. Zariah continued, "My child deserves stability, love, safety, someone who shows up without conditions. Tobias has shown none of that." She sat down slowly, her expression steady. Colden looked at her with quiet admiration. The judge shuffled papers, then said, "Mr. Granger, according to hospital records, you were not present during prenatal appointments, the birth, or the early months of the child's life." Tobias shifted. "I didn't know how to—" "That's not an excuse," the judge cut in. "And based on submitted evidence, you repeatedly harassed Ms. Caldwell after the inheritance was revealed." Tobias's face flushed red. Saren lowered her head, shaking slightly. The judge continued, "There is also evidence you attempted to gain access to Miss Caldwell's residence without invitation." Tobias tried to speak, Your Honor. "Quiet," the judge ordered. Tobias fell silent. The judge lifted another document. "Meanwhile, Miss Caldwell has shown full commitment to the child's well-being. She has stable housing, financial resources, and emotional support." His eyes shifted to Colden briefly. "Mr. Reeves, your presence is noted as supportive, not disruptive." Colden nodded respectfully. The judge straightened in his seat. "I see no basis to grant Mr. Granger parental rights at this time." The courtroom erupted with murmurs. Tobias paled. Saren covered her mouth in shock. The judge continued, "The petition is denied. Full custody remains with Miss Caldwell. We will schedule periodic reviews only at Miss Caldwell's request." The final blow landed hard. "Mr. Granger, you are ordered to cease contact unless initiated by Miss Caldwell. Any breach will be considered harassment." Tobias's mouth hung open. Saren's face turned sheet white. Zariah exhaled, not dramatically, but with a soft release that marked the closing of a long, painful chapter. Her child was protected. Her peace was protected. Her future was protected. Leaving the courthouse, Tobias and Saren were swarmed by reporters again. This time, the questions were harsher. "Tobias, how does it feel to lose parental rights? Did the judge say you abandoned her?" "Saren, do you regret the marriage? Is it true your relationship started behind Zariah's back? Are you both facing financial problems?" Tobias didn't answer. He looked broken, the confident man he once pretended to be gone entirely. Saren wasn't any steadier. Their marriage had already been strained by guilt, insecurity, and Tobias's fixation on Zariah. Now, under public scrutiny, the cracks widened. On live television, while Tobias tried to shove past cameras, Saren snapped, "This is your fault, Tobias. You dragged us here." Tobias spun around. "My fault? You encouraged me. You can't let her go. Even now you can't stop obsessing over her." Saren cried, "You're the one who pushed me to try again." He shot back. Their argument spiraled on the courthouse steps, recorded by dozens of cameras. By the time security intervened, their marriage was already trending online as a spectacle of chaos. Headlines flooded every platform. Tobias and Saren meltdown outside courthouse, marriage in crisis. Ex-husband loses custody battle. Saren explodes in public. The couple who left Zariah now falling apart. Their collapse wasn't private. It wasn't quiet. It wasn't graceful. It was the consequence of choices they made long before Zariah ever rose to power. Meanwhile, inside a quiet SUV, Zariah held her baby gently as Colden sat beside them. She looked out the window, past the flashing cameras and the shouting reporters, and whispered, "We finally closed that door." Colden smiled softly. "And you did it with grace." Her baby stirred against her shoulder, tiny fingers curling into her shirt. Zariah kissed the top of her baby's head and whispered, "We're safe now." And for the first time in a long time, she truly believed it. The months after the court ruling moved quietly but powerfully through Zariah's life. For the first time since her mother's passing, her world felt steady. Not perfect, not easy, but steady, a kind of emotional ground she had never known before. Her child grew each day, babbling softly, reaching for everything, giggling whenever Colden made the slightest silly face. The baby brought warmth into the home in ways Zariah couldn't fully describe. Soft, bright, stabilizing warmth. And Colden, he kept showing up. Not loudly, not dramatically, not possessively, just present. Every morning he sent a message, checking in. Need anything today? Every evening, he stopped by to help with feedings, bath time, or simply to keep her company during long nights. He never assumed a role. He never overstepped. He never tried to force closeness. But slowly, brick by brick, he built trust in ways she had never experienced. One evening, while Zariah rocked the baby in her arms, Colden was assembling a baby swing she had purchased earlier that afternoon. He sat cross-legged on the floor, instructions spread out, brow furrowed as he studied each diagram. "You know," she teased softly, "you don't have to build everything in silence. You could ask for help." He grinned. "I could, but then, I'd have to admit, I have no idea what I'm doing." She laughed, a light, genuine laugh that filled the room. "You're doing pretty well for someone pretending to know nothing." He glanced up, "Only because I've had good motivation, which is..." He pointed toward the baby with the handle of a tiny screwdriver. The room softened. Zariah looked down at her daughter, wide-eyed, curious, resting in her arms, and felt something shift inside her. A quiet ache, a warm realization. "You really care about her, don't you?" she whispered. Colden paused mid-screw. His voice dropped to something tender. "I care about both of you." The words settled gently in her heart like warm sunlight. Zariah had loved before, loved deeply, loved blindly, loved the wrong person with a devotion that cost her everything. But this was different. Colden didn't demand love. He didn't pressure her for more. He didn't take advantage of her vulnerability. He simply matched her pace. One day at the marsh trail, while the baby napped in the stroller, Colden walked beside her with his hands in his pockets, kicking small stones along the path. "Do you ever think about the future?" he asked quietly. She hesitated. "I think about my daughter's future, what I want to give her." "And yours?" he asked. She exhaled. "I'm learning to take my time with that part." Colden nodded. "I don't want to rush you." Her eyes softened. "I know." He looked down, then back at her. "But whenever you're ready to let someone stand with you, I hope you'll consider me." The words weren't heavy. They weren't demanding. They were open. A gentle offering. Zariah's reply came not in words, but in how her shoulders relaxed, how she didn't step away, how she looked at him like someone she finally saw clearly for the first time. "Colden," she whispered, "you already stand with me." His lips curled into a smile. Not triumphant, just grateful. One evening, Zariah invited him to stay for dinner. She cooked a simple meal, roasted chicken, seasoned vegetables, and cornbread. Flavors that reminded her of Charlotte, of Sundays filled with aunties gossiping, uncles cracking jokes, and kids running in circles. Colden set the table, folding napkins in neat squares, lighting a single candle in the center. "You really didn't have to do all that," she said. He shrugged. "Feels nice, that's all." The baby sat in a small chair beside them, gumming on a teething ring while they ate. At one point, she squealed and reached toward Colden with a little laugh. He looked at her with mock seriousness. "Are you flirting with me?" The baby giggled again. Zariah nearly choked on her cornbread. "You're ridiculous," she said, laughing. Colden reached over and gently wiped a bit of mashed carrot from the baby's cheek. "I've been called worse." Zariah's heart tugged again, hard this time. The sight of him smiling at her child, without hesitation or discomfort, made something unfold inside her chest. Trust. Affection, safety, a kind of safety she had never known with Tobias. After dinner, when the baby finally fell asleep, they sat together on the couch. Zariah's head rested gently on his shoulder. "Is this okay?" she asked, softly. Colden's voice was even gentler. "Only if it feels right to you." "It does," she whispered. He didn't move, didn't tighten his hold, didn't press for more, and the stillness, the quiet closeness, felt like the beginning of a new life. Even as she grew closer to him, Zariah carried fears, deep fears. One evening, after putting the baby to sleep, she sat across from Colden on the couch, twisting the hem of her sleeve. "There's something I need to say," she murmured. He closed his notebook and leaned in, fully attentive. "Tell me," she inhaled. "I'm scared to love again." His expression softened. "Of course you are. My marriage broke me," she said painfully. "My best friend betrayed me. I don't want to open myself up just to end up alone again. I don't want my daughter to see me hurt. Colden reached out, slowly, placing his hand over hers. You don't owe me your heart, he said gently, but you owe yourself the chance to heal. I'm not here to replace anyone. I'm not here to take anything. I'm here to walk with you. At your pace. Her eyes glistened. Why? She whispered. He smiled softly. Because you're worth showing up for. A tear slipped down her cheek. She didn't hide it. For the first time in years, someone was holding space for her pain instead of trying to escape it. Weeks passed, filled with quiet moments that slowly wove Colden into the rhythm of Zariah's life. He joined her and the baby on beach walks at sunrise. He learned the baby's feeding schedule. He helped her read through company documents between naps. He stood beside her during interviews and press events, offering silent reassurance. He brought little treats from the bakery near her building, warm rolls, fresh fruit, chamomile tea. He held the baby so Zariah could shower peacefully. He listened when she needed to talk. He stayed silent when she just needed presence. One evening, as they sat on the floor building a set of baby blocks, the baby wobbled forward and grabbed Colden's finger. He laughed, lifting her gently into his lap. Zariah watched them, her heart thudding with an emotion she no longer had to hide from herself. She loved him. Not suddenly, not all at once, but in the way flowers bloom, slowly, steadily, beautifully. Colden turned his head and met her gaze. You okay? He asked gently. She nodded. I'm better than okay. He smiled softly, the kind of smile that said he understood exactly what she meant. And for the first time, she didn't look away. Zariah had spent the first months after her inheritance quietly learning the structure of the empire. She had read documents, met with advisors, studied financial maps of her mother's intricate networks, and absorbed decades of strategic decisions her mother had crafted with intention and secrecy. But now, it was time to step into the world, fully, publicly, powerfully. The Caldwell Empire was no longer a whisper. It was a headline, a marvel, a shock to every economic analyst who, for years, believed wealth of that scale belonged only to global corporations or governments. And at the center of it stood a young black mother who had once been abandoned at her lowest point. Now she was rising, not to prove anything to the world, but to honor the woman who built an empire with humility and purpose. The morning Zariah returned to Manhattan as the official leader of the Caldwell network, the air crackled with anticipation. Reporters lined the sidewalks. Investors flocked to the steps of her building. Screens in Times Square displayed headlines about her scheduled briefing. Colden stood beside her in the back seat of the SUV, holding her daughter gently in a soft white blanket. He served as emotional grounding, not as a prop, a quiet presence she had grown to depend on. Zariah smoothed her blazer sleeves and glanced at her daughter. I want her to see everything one day. She will, Colden said softly. And she'll be proud. When they stepped out of the car, photographers burst into rapid flashes. Crowds cheered. Some held signs that read, Representation matters. Black excellence rising. Caldwell legacy continues. A few signs carried pictures of Marvell, the woman who had lived quietly, invisibly wealthy, but left behind one of the largest hidden empires in history. Zariah pressed her hand to her heart. She would have never believed this. Colden leaned in. She built it for you. She knew you'd carry it better than anyone. She nodded slowly, letting those words steady her as she walked into the financial district's tallest building, the one her mother secretly owned. Days once filled with tension now unfolded with purpose. Executives who once spoke too quickly now paused, choosing their words with care, not because they feared her, but because they respected her clarity. Zariah wasn't bombastic or intimidating. She was measured, calm, and insightful. She led with grace, not ego. During one meeting, a senior executive presented a plan to expand investments in foreign markets. Zariah listened intently before responding. Expansion is fine, but my mother didn't build this empire just to grow numbers. She built it to uplift. I will not continue expansion unless it respects communities, especially the marginalized. The room went quiet. She didn't blink. A younger advisor nodded slowly. So you want every project to include community impact? Zariah smiled. Yes. Profit without purpose isn't legacy, it's noise. Her voice carried the same wisdom her mother used to share on their front porch in Charlotte during warm summer evenings. She could almost hear Marvell whisper, "Build with a clean heart, baby. Money can move mountains, but it should never crush people." When she walked onto the stage of her first global tech summit, the audience, a sea of CEOs, innovators, venture capitalists, rose in a standing ovation before she even spoke. A moderator smiled. "Miss Caldwell, your arrival has changed our industry overnight. How does it feel to lead a trillion-dollar empire?" Her first words were simple. "It feels like a responsibility, not a throne." The room stilled. My mother believed innovation should solve problems, not create divides. So, the Caldwell Network will fund technologies that protect communities, not exploit them. Cameras flashed. Heads nodded. She continued, "We will invest in digital access for underserved neighborhoods. We will build tech centers in the South. We will train young people in cybersecurity, software engineering, financial literacy, and we will do it without expecting anything in return." Applause erupted. Loud, long, heartfelt. Zariah wasn't there to impress tech giants. She was there to shift their conscience. Next came philanthropic galas, where billionaires sat beneath chandeliers, discussing global impact. But when Zariah took the stage, she didn't talk about numbers or forecasts. She spoke about neighborhood cookouts, about church aunties who fed everyone, about black children who deserved to dream without limits, about mothers who held communities together without applause. She spoke about Marvell. My mother gave more than money. She gave dignity. She gave wisdom. She gave light even when she didn't have much to spare. This empire is not built on wealth. It is built on compassion. Guests wiped tears from their eyes. Zariah ended her speech with a promise. "I will honor her by lifting as many people as she wished she could." The applause was not polite. It was emotional. People saw her not as an heiress, but as a vessel for something bigger than herself. The first major project she launched was the Marvell Foundation for Growth and Opportunity. She worked for months with experts, educators, and community leaders, ensuring every detail reflected her mother's heart. The foundation focused on free entrepreneurship programs for Black women, scholarships for students from underserved neighborhoods, affordable housing initiatives in Charlotte, community-owned grocery stores, job training centers for returning citizens, tech incubators for young innovators, mental health clinics with culturally competent care. At the ribbon-cutting ceremony in Charlotte, Zariah stood in front of the neighborhood she grew up in. Families gathered. Aunties fanned themselves in the heat. Kids played double dutch nearby. Neighbors called her name with love and pride. "This is for you," Zariah said, her voice thick with emotion. "My mother loved this community. She raised me here with values, not money. And now those values will help raise the next generation." An older woman stepped forward, one who had known Marvell personally. With tears in her eyes, she told Zariah, "Your mama would be so proud of you, baby." Zariah couldn't hold back tears. In that moment, with her daughter on her hip and Colden standing quietly in the back of the crowd, Zariah felt her mother's presence more strongly than she had since the funeral. No matter how much her public profile grew, Zariah kept her private life grounded. When she returned home from summits, interviews, or board meetings, she found Colden reading books about childhood development, or rocking her daughter gently, or preparing dinner while humming softly. He didn't care about cameras. He didn't care about headlines. He didn't care about the empire. He cared about Zariah, the woman, not the heiress. One quiet night, she sat on the couch watching him bounce her daughter on his knee while making silly faces. The baby giggled uncontrollably. Zariah's heart melted. "You two are adorable," she said. Colden grinned. "We try." She laughed softly, a sound that still surprised her sometimes. As she watched him, a realization washed over her. Her mother may not have lived to see this moment, but she left Zariah with enough wisdom to choose a different kind of love this time. A love built on presence, not promises. On actions, not words. On peace, not pressure. A love that would never abandon her. Although Zariah kept her romantic life private, people noticed the man who always stayed close during events, always helped manage her daughter's stroller, always looked at Zariah with quiet admiration. Articles began surfacing. Who is the gentleman always beside Zariah Caldwell? The financial consultant who became her anchor. A new chapter in Zariah Caldwell's personal life? Zariah ignored the speculation, But Colden once teased, "I never expected to be a mystery man." She laughed. "You handle it well." He smirked. "I'm doing my best." Their closeness didn't need labels. Not yet. What they had was growing naturally, without pressure, without fear. The world might not know everything, but Zariah knew one truth clearly now. She had found love again. A love that healed instead of hurt. The months following the public collapse of Tobias and Saren's marriage played out like a slow-motion unraveling, messy, public, and unavoidable. Their argument on the courthouse steps became a viral clip, replayed endlessly across social platforms. Memes were made, comment sections filled with sharp observations. Articles dissected their downfall with brutal honesty. They had once believed they were leaving behind a woman who had nothing. Now the world saw that they had walked away from the cornerstone of an empire. Zariah never asked for their humiliation, but neither did she interfere with it. Life had a way of balancing itself. After losing the custody case, Tobias spiraled even further. His company, which had once been modestly stable, lost investors rapidly. No one wanted to be associated with a man whose personal choices were now public record. Clients left. Partnerships dissolved. Banks withdrew offers. His financial decline grew so severe that he had to sell the condo he once proudly brought Saren to. That was the first crack. The second crack was deeper. Saren, already shaken by their public embarrassment, began to resent him openly. Fights erupted in their home. She accused him of ruining her reputation. He accused her of encouraging him to chase Zariah again, but both of them knew the truth. Their marriage had been built on betrayal, and foundations like that don't last. One night their final argument erupted so loudly that neighbors called the police, not out of danger but out of exhaustion from hearing them for weeks. The next morning Saren packed a suitcase and left without looking back. Within days, photos of her leaving their apartment hit social media. Tobias tried calling her, but she blocked his number. By the end of the month, Tobias stood alone in a small rented unit with peeling paint and flickering lights. The man who once walked with arrogance through corporate halls now spent nights staring at the ceiling, wondering how everything had slipped away. But the truth was simple. He didn't lose it. He gave it up, piece by piece, decision by decision. Saren expected sympathy after leaving Tobias, but instead confronted a harsh wake-up call. Her social circle distanced themselves. Her job contract was quietly not renewed. Her online followers dragged her for betrayal gone wrong. Even her own family had little to say. Most messages she received were variations of, "You made your bed." But the most painful consequence wasn't public criticism. It was the private realization that she had thrown away her longest friendship for a man who had never truly loved her. One evening, after scrolling through endless clips of Zariah leading summits, accepting awards, opening community centers, Saren broke down completely. She whispered into her palms, "I lost her. I really lost her." But that was the truth. She didn't just lose a friend. She lost the opportunity to grow as a better person. And there was no returning from that. Through it all, Zariah kept her world steady and private. She didn't celebrate their downfalls. She didn't add commentary online. She didn't give interviews addressing them. She focused on her daughter, on the empire, on community projects, on Colden. Peace had become too precious to trade for bitterness. But one afternoon, while reviewing documents in her office, she received a message from her attorney. Tobias has requested a final meeting. Purely voluntary. No legal pressure. Zariah stared at the words for a long moment. Colden, sitting across from her with her daughter on his knee, asked, "You okay?" She closed her laptop. "Tobias wants to meet." Colden didn't speak immediately. He looked at her, searching her expression before he responded softly, "Do you want to?" Zariah exhaled. "I don't know." He nodded. "Whatever you decide, I'm with you." It was that steadiness, that respect, that made her sure of one thing: she would choose peace, not fear. "I'll meet him," she said. The meeting took place in a quiet conference room, not the grand boardroom where he had once begged, not the courtroom where he was exposed. Just 4 walls, a table, and 2 chairs. Zariah arrived first. She placed her phone face down on the table. Her breathing was steady, her posture calm. Tobias arrived minutes later. He looked different, thinner, strained, humbled. His clothes didn't fit as well. His eyes carried exhaustion and remorse. He sat down carefully, as if afraid she might change her mind and throw him out. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then Tobias swallowed hard. "Thank you for seeing me." Zariah nodded. "What do you want to say?" He looked down at his hands. I'm sorry. For everything." It was the first apology he'd ever offered without motive behind it. "I was selfish," he continued. "I hurt you. I abandoned you. I betrayed our vows. I wasn't man enough to handle real life, so I ran toward the easiest distraction. Saren didn't break our marriage. I did. I ruined everything myself." Zariah didn't interrupt. He lifted his eyes slowly. "I just needed to say it." She nodded softly. "I accept your apology." Tobias let out a shaky breath, as if that acceptance released years of guilt. But Zariah continued calmly. "Acceptance isn't permission. It's closure." He nodded. "I understand. And I need you to hear this clearly," she said, voice steady. "You will never have access to my child, not because I'm angry, but because your presence would confuse and destabilize her. She deserves safety, consistency, love." Tobias blinked back tears. "I know. And you're not capable of that," she added. "Not cruelly, but truthfully." He nodded slowly again. "I just hope one day she knows I'm sorry too." "That is your burden to carry," Zariah said. "Not hers." The room fell quiet again. When Tobias finally rose to leave, he paused at the door. "You became the woman I always knew you could be. I'm glad someone better stood beside you." Zariah didn't reply. She didn't need to. The moment the door clicked shut, she felt something inside her unhook, release, and drift away like dust in sunlight. Closure. Real closure. Later that evening, Zariah returned home to find Colden on the balcony holding her daughter against his chest, gently swaying while the sun set over the ocean. The orange and pink glow stretched across the water, reflecting shimmering lines across the waves. The baby cooed softly, reaching for Colden's chin. He smiled down at her. "You telling me about your day?" Zariah stepped onto the balcony, moved by the sight before her. When Colden saw her, his expression softened. "How did it go?" She walked to him, rested her hand gently on his forearm, and whispered, "It's over. Truly over." He nodded. "You did the hardest part." Her eyes glistened. "Thank you for walking with me." He looked at her carefully, with a tenderness she had grown to trust deeply. "I didn't walk with you," he said. "You led. I just stayed close enough so you never felt alone." Her breath wavered, not from sadness, but from the weight of finally being seen. She leaned into him slightly, her head touching his shoulder. He didn't move, didn't rush, didn't shift the moment into something heavier. He simply held space for her. The baby giggled again, reaching between them. Zariah smiled. "She loves you." Colden chuckled softly. "She has excellent taste." Zariah turned to face the ocean, her daughter nestled between them, and whispered, "I think this is the family I was always meant to have." Colden's hand brushed hers gently. "Whenever you're ready." "I'm here." She nodded. "I'm ready." And for the first time since the story began, with grief, betrayal, loss, abandonment, Zariah felt fullness instead of emptiness. She had rebuilt her world with purpose, with heart, with intention, with love that healed rather than destroyed. Her mother's legacy was not just the empire. It was this moment, this peace, this new beginning. Sometimes the people who walk away from you are not your loss. They are your clarity. Sometimes heartbreak is the doorway to the life you were meant to live. And sometimes the ending you feared becomes the beginning you deserved. Remember, protect your peace, listen to your spirit, and never chase what walked out on you. Your next chapter may be the one that changes everything. If this story moved you, please like, comment, and subscribe to Mr. Michael Stories. Your engagement helps us share powerful stories and life lessons with more people around the world.